Five. Good evening and welcome to this virtual Fringe meeting of the Conservative Group for Europe, where I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend and former cabinet colleague, Julian Smith, MP for Skipton and Ripon. For those of you who haven't come across the Conservative Group for Europe before, CGE has existed for over 50 years now, and we are a group of conservatives who believe in a close partnership between United Kingdom and our fellow democracies in Europe, including with the European Union. But the referendum has happened. We accept that result. And the real focus now, where I am intending to lead the CGE, is to turn the group into being a prime forum for the discussion of and the formulation of ideas about what kind of relationship we want to build up with our neighbours, the other democracies in Europe, over the next 5, 10, 20 years. There are so many issues on which we can work together to our mutual advantage, us outside the EU, like some other European democracies, Norway and Switzerland, other democracies remaining as members of the EU. And I think we will advocate for that sort of strategic approach to our relations with the European neighbours within the Conservative family. The other thing that I'm very keen to do, and we've made a start on with a number of webinars so far, is to foster stronger relationships between the Conservative Party and our fellow centre-right parties in the Conservative and Christian Democrat traditions around Europe. At a recent webinar, we were addressed by Norbert Röttgen, the chair of the Bundestag's Foreign Affairs Committee and one of the candidates to succeed Angela Merkel. And we will be joined in the next month by Alexander Stubb, former Prime Minister of Finland. And again, very interesting perspective. We look forward to hearing from him. Please, if you want to contribute by way of questions or observations, there is a chat facility that should be on your screen, and we will work through that. I will moderate the questions. If you can't make contact that way, then please do contact CCHQ in the email or number that should be, I think, on the screen in case of emergencies, and they will relay the questions through to me. We have, I'm afraid, a 45-minute hard deadline, cut-off point when the broadcast will cease. So I would appeal to anybody, please keep questions as brief as possible. Julian Smith, as I'm sure most of you know, served most recently as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and achieved what many thought was impossible, working with Simon Coveney, the Irish Foreign Minister, and persuaded the different parties in Northern Ireland to come together to re-establish devolved government that had been broken and absent for about 3 years. Before that, Julian was the government chief whip from 2017 to 2019 at, I think, one of the most difficult times to be a government chief whip in our party's modern history. Before coming into Parliament in 2010 to represent Skipton and Ripon, he built up and then ran an executive search company in London and in Singapore. And I also happen to know that Julian, in certainly his younger days, was an extremely classy and competitive squash player. Now he's out of government. I'm sure he will be keen to take up a game. So Julian, could I invite you to make some opening remarks to us, and then I'll move on to a discussion and questions. But you're very welcome.
Thank you, David, and thanks for the warm welcome, and good evening, everybody. Key to setting the scene for a Brexit deal for the withdrawal agreement last year was the development of better relationships between the Irish and UK teams, and particularly the leaders. My own relationship with Irish ministers, which David did actually so much to foster for many years when he was in government, was forged by ensuring that after our first formal bilateral to discuss how to restore government installment that took place at Hillsborough Castle, I got everybody down to the pub to break the ice. And from that point, the relationship was built on human contact, mutual respect and trust. didn't necessarily mean we always agreed, but it did allow space for agreement to come and for time to help when things got difficult. A more positive atmosphere was built up in July and August and September last year that led then to the breakthrough talks on the withdrawal agreement at the Wirral between the Prime Minister and the Taoiseach. And from the moment those two leaders connected in the north of England, the main issue that had stopped resolution of the Brexit debate, the Irish border, was resolved. That was also the approach I took to the talks that David referred to in his opening remarks to restore Stormont, driving to Londonderry late at night to cajole the SDLP in a pub, pushing hard with Arlene Foster and Michelle O'Neill to get them to meet and actually talk through their issues, and making the case to the Alliance Party and the Ulster Unionist Party that we really needed them over many lunches, dinners and meetings. We needed all five parties on board. It wasn't just a case of making the case to party leaders. We met with hundreds of party members and supporters and ordinary voters to ensure we understood their concerns and made the case for getting their parties back into government. Working in Northern Ireland with unionists, nationalists, aligned respective positions, combined with the stark message that the candidates in Northern Ireland got at last December's general election, eventually led to the New Decade, New Approach deal that, after 3 years of no government in Northern Ireland, got things back up and running. And the lessons of Stormont and of that period for me is that putting aside differences, building relationships of respect and understanding, and focusing on governing for the people of Northern Ireland was the right thing for leaders, their parties and their supporters to do. And had government not been in place as we entered the biggest challenge in recent history, the first phase of COVID, I think it would have been a lot more difficult for that part of the United Kingdom. I hope and I genuinely believe a similar practical attitude can now dominate both the FTA negotiations that are coming to a conclusion between the UK and the EU and the implementation negotiations of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The withdrawal agreement and protocol is, after all, the most important ongoing shared responsibility for the EU and the UK in the future. There's still a lot of work to go through on the protocol, and I hope both sides can develop these discussions at pace in order to provide the urgent clarity needed by business and citizens on both sides of the Irish Sea on our issues. But most remaining dialogue has to be through trust-based discussions and intense negotiation at both an official and political level. We're moving from Brexit as purely a legal agreement, legal negotiation, into a new phase, a practical political process, yes, with tough negotiating, but with a shared commitment to ensuring the spirit as well as the letter of the protocol is maintained, with day-to-day decisions taken through the Joint Committee. This is the body that both sides agreed in the withdrawal agreement would be the centre of how issues and disputes get dealt with. We need practical people from that committee, a trusting environment where issues can be resolved. At the centre of both the protocol and the FTA negotiations and the future relationship with the EU, we do need a strong understanding and respect for the positions of the EU, the Irish, and our own relationships. Complete respect for the Northern Irish nationalist and unaligned position, as well as unionists and other voters. And above all, we need a focus on pragmatism, a commitment to practical and rapid solutions by the EU and UK governments of issues as they come up. Stability, trust, and strong relationships have to be the watchword of those implementing the protocol. These are also the principles that I am sure Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson will adopt over the coming days and weeks regarding the finalisation of a deal and an FTA. But these are also the principles we'll need to ensure the best possible base for our ongoing relationship with the EU. Having seen how insular we got during the Brexit debates in Parliament and how frayed our relationships with our closest trading partners became, we have to now put in very hard yards to rebuild these relationships and ensure we influence issues in our direction, as we did with Ireland last year. And we will have to work doubly hard, as we'll now be out of the room in the endless meetings and plenaries of the EU Council, many of which David, when he was Europe Minister, took part in, which, however frustrating, did allow for relationships to be developed and deals to be done. We'll need to roll out the red carpet to our European neighbours, and ministers and officials will have to put the time into travelling to see close contact with their opposite numbers. The future of the EU-UK relationship will be based on how we kickstart these relationships, and it was good to hear David's comment about what you're all going to do and the group is going to do over the coming months at a political level. It's not just about transforming our people relationships, it's also about specific policy areas where we'll have to work together. Climate change, health security, science and research. We'll hopefully come up with a practical answer in these final weeks of the FTA negotiation on how Britain can work closely with the EU Scientific Research Initiative Horizon. The political declaration that was signed with the withdrawal agreement last year also looked to closer working in other areas such as Erasmus. There's significant work to be done around how the EU and the UK work together on carbon trading and the Green Deal, where Brussels has just committed hundreds of billions of euros to the energy transition. Post-COVID, there'll be many areas of joint working required to ensure that the health security of our citizens is maintained. There'll no doubt be many bumps before we get a deal between the EU and the UK, but I remain confident we'll get a deal and now need to ensure it is as full and as comprehensive as possible. But let's also encourage everyone involved in these negotiations now, as the UK leaves, to refocus our approach. For Leave voters and Remain voters in Northern Ireland and beyond, Brexit is happening. We now need to ensure that both the protocol and the FCA work for both sides. The last few years have felt very inwardly focused. I hope that subsequent years are outward, respectful, and focused on engaging with the EU on key policy areas and ensuring that we have the best possible relationships with each of the EU member states and with Brussels.
Julian, thank you very much indeed for that. Could I say to people watching that I'm afraid CCHQ has got a technical problem with the interactive chat. So can I ask anybody with questions, please, to email them to the address that I hope is on your screen, but in case not, it is campaigns@Conservative Group for Europe, or .org.uk. That's campaigns@conservativegroupforeurope.org.uk. And they will then use alternative means to get the questions to me. But Julian, can we start perhaps by chatting a bit about Northern Ireland? And clearly, you, Simon Coveney, and others sort of worked incredibly hard to get devolution restored, but it's probably an exaggeration to say that there is a real sense of shared purpose amongst the parties that are together in government. You go to somewhere like North Belfast, it's not exactly a shared society there. How fragile or robust is the process there, and what do you think we need to do? What would be most effective to ensure that peace and stability is maintained in Northern Ireland?
Well, David, I mean, I sort of recognise again the contribution you made during your time in government, and particularly the latter years to that Irish relationship. I mean, they're our main trading partner. We've got very good relationships with them, and I think it's really important that we maintain them. But you're right, between the parties, even though both Arlene Foster and Michelle O'Neill have done a fantastic job, and the fellow ministers, Robin Swan as the health minister, during this COVID phase, it is still fragile. And I think the biggest thing we have to help those leaders with is give them confidence, clarify that really this is the only place, they can sit in at the moment. I mean, governing in the best interest of people. The biggest issue that was coming up when we were trying to restore government was that voters were getting really frustrated with politicians not taking responsibility, and that neither the Sinn Féin ultimate goal nor a desire to, not share government by some on the unionist side is going to get us anywhere. We have to really, this is the only place, is the Good Friday Agreement and making the most of it. I think one of the things we can do is to help them build capacity. So there's a lot of very good younger MLAs, and I think building those relationships, giving them skills and working with them is really important. And then going through some of the plans that were in the New Decade, New Approach around reform of infrastructure, the fiscal council, other initiatives to help them with governance. It didn't have a very good week last week when the two leaders failed to make a decision on a head of the civil service. I think the other observation is that this group of people needs some help in making decisions. As you know, David, at a senior level in politics, it's often about making a decision, not necessarily always getting it right. And often decisions can be deferred in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. And what about the significance of the border on the island of Ireland? How important is that in terms of the politics as well as the day-to-day economics?
Well, I think it's huge, and I think that the tension last year when people thought that no deal was a possibility was palpable. The rights of Northern Ireland citizens, both to identify as Irish or British, that are enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement, are very heartfelt by many. We've seen in recent weeks that the US still has, a strong view on the position of the border. And I think whilst that we're unlikely to return to the troubles, we were seeing during my time last year significant upticks in violence from the new IRA and general discontent. And I think we just need to keep reminding people it is very fragile there, and we need to do everything we can to maintain the status quo.
Thank you. And clearly, this experience in Northern Ireland, working with different leaders who have utterly opposed political objectives and values, it's probably given you some sort of chance to reflect on, what will help towards conflict resolution, not just in Northern Ireland, but in other parts of the world. I mean, looking back on your time working in Northern Ireland, how much of the kind of approach that you've described to us do you think is sort of unique to the Northern Ireland and island of Ireland and UK circumstance and political culture? Are there some things that you experienced and learned that you think you could apply to the Middle East or Nagorno-Karabakh at the moment, or other parts of the world that are bitterly divided?
Well, I think it's always difficult to, but my observation would be that when you're conducting those negotiations amongst sides that were, not even talking to each other in December last year, really, it is about understanding each of their positions and respecting each of those positions, even if you don't agree with them. And obviously, as a Secretary of State, you're representing both the United Kingdom and you're responsible in terms of the Good Friday Agreement international treaty. And in all of these conflicts, I think it is a case of someone driving a real understanding of those positions and developing trust. And for whatever reason, I was lucky enough to win the trust of those five parties. That didn't mean they liked me, but they managed to trust them. So I think this combination of trust and an understanding and respect for everyone's position.
Yeah. And are you optimistic looking forward?
I am. I think when you look at some of the younger MLAs that are coming up, when you look at how the current leaders have dealt with COVID, Robin Swan as Health Minister, for example, Nicola Mallon, who is the Infrastructure Minister, Naomi Long as Justice, and Arlene and Michelle, I think have all actually worked very well together. That doesn't mean, I think, your summary is correct at the start of this part of the conversation, that it is still fragile, and anything the Conservative Group for Europe can do in terms of engaging, I think, with Northern Ireland as part of its activities would be really, really good.
And clearly, Conservatives, we are also unionists, and we want to see Northern Ireland choose to remain within the Union. But the demographics, are pretty evenly balanced at the moment, aren't they, between those who think of themselves as British and those who think of themselves as Irish? What on the basis of your experience, Julian, do you think of the approaches, the arguments, the tone that is most likely to persuade the majority of people in Northern Ireland, actually, whether they think of themselves as British or Irish, actually remaining in the United Kingdom is the best thing to do?
You're right. There are an increasing number of swing voters, unaligned voters. And I think with that group, and also with moderate nationalists, you do have to understand their position, respect their position, and obviously seek to persuade them that the union is the right place to be. But I think trying to be too aggressive in one's message to that group is bound to fail. I think it has to be a much greater understanding of what are their priorities, and then a very targeted approach in terms of why economically, why in foreign policy terms, why in defence terms the union is the place to be. But I think that group of voters is going to be a really interesting, both in Northern Ireland, then similar groups in Scotland as well. And I think we have to treat them with the utmost respect and work with them on convincing them that we're better off together.
Thank you very much indeed. Can we just move on to the subject you touched on, which was the green agenda? And I know this is something that you've been taking a particular interest in since leaving government. And obviously we've got COP26 in Glasgow next year, sort of really big opportunity for global Britain to demonstrate we still have leadership and influence. What do you hope to see coming out of that? And what do you hope that the government does in the months between now and the Glasgow conference in terms of the UK, both in terms of the UK's response and in terms of trying to shape the international response to the climate emergency?
Well, I think that first of all, in just returning a bit to Northern Ireland, one of the areas where I felt there could be a lot of joint working, a lot of north-south working, was on climate change, and that's why we put that in that New Decade, New Approach. I think that's a really tangible way, and something for young voters that would be very positively received. I think in terms of UK priorities, it strikes me that we have to work through what are the areas we want to excel in, what are the industries and the technologies we want to focus on, and then really go for it. And I think if you look at the strategies of Germany and other countries who have done a lot of thinking on this, we've got some way to go, I think, in terms of having a consistency on our climate change priorities. And as part of that, and it was what I was trying to say in my opening remarks, I believe we have to work through very rapidly, it's alluded to in the political declaration, how are we going to work with the EU on the carbon trading policies and also on this Green Deal? The EU has put a huge amount of money and effort into stretch targets on climate change. We will have left the EU. This is now no longer we've left, but how are we going to engage with them? Should we be associate members of that? Should we do, in my view, probably some with them, some things with them, some not with them? But again, I think we need to move at pace on that, because we can't, I don't know how you feel about the last few years in government, but it strikes me as if, as we've had this focus on the Brexit ball in Westminster, many countries have got ahead of us in many sectors and many industries and many areas in terms of their vision for the future. We've got a lot of catching up to do, and obviously we've got the issues around COVID, but we have to move quickly to work out how we're going to work with the EU on climate change.
I've got a question here from Gerard Fox, who asks, is net zero 2050 the best means of achieving decarbonisation in the UK? And is the Paris Agreement itself now sufficient, given the evidence we see? Or should the IPCC 2018 target of a 1.5 degree objective be adopted?
Well, I think we should keep pushing to stretch ourselves on the target. So I think the implication of the question is, can we do more? I think, yes, we should try to, and we should do it for two reasons. We should do it first and foremost for the issue itself, the need to address climate change. But secondly, we need to pivot out of COVID into some new areas, technology areas, green areas, to create jobs and create opportunities for young people in the UK. And I think this green agenda is one where we can really build in terms of manufacturing jobs, technology jobs, offshore wind, etc. But we need to prioritise quickly. The government does have its energy white paper coming out, and I'm sure more will be laid out then. But it is also about giving confidence to the private sector, who now have many options on where to invest, and to make sure we're giving them a good story to tell.
So what should the government be doing in terms of trying to promote those private sector innovations? I mean, we're talking presumably sometimes about established big companies, but also about newcomers or disruptive companies that are challenging, big established PLCs. I mean, should there be some sort of tax or other incentive to try to help those, or should we be taxing some of the existing sort of high carbon activities to try to shift the economy in the direction that we want to see?
Well, I think those climate change targets are very useful in terms of pressurising the private sector anyway. But I think also I'd prefer to kind of focus on incentives. And then, when you look at solar, we obviously intervened there in terms of incentives to invest in that technology, and for consumers to invest in that technology. I think we need to clarify that for other areas as well. And it is a complex sector, because you've got nuclear, we've got the very big decisions to make on nuclear, big decisions to make on offshore wind and tidal and other areas. And I think it is around providing incentives, but not intervening too much after we provided those incentives and provided some broad focus of where we think we should be on who the winners are.
I've also got a question here about water. Obviously, as a North Yorkshire MP representing a beautiful chunk of the Dales, I mean, you're just north, I think, of the West Yorkshire conurbations. And the questioner draws attention to the report, I think, in the last week, 10 days, that pretty much every English river was failing to meet quality tests for pollution in the most recent monthly figures. What are we missing here? What do we need to be doing to improve river quality?
Well, we had this issue on the coast as well, I think, a few years ago, and we improved that. But I think on many of these things, it's about execution. We've often had quite a sense of dealing with these things, but actually when it comes down to it, we do need to execute and make sure we're testing and we're bringing people up if they fail. I do think actually over the past couple of years we've had significant improvement in how we've intervened on flooding, but I think it is around the execution of those targets, and to make sure we're rigorous in enforcement.
And you mentioned, Julian, the importance of innovation, science, new technology there. And if we look across the channel, one of the things that was agreed in the multi-annual financial framework that the EU 27 agreed to was to replace the Horizon with the Horizon 2020 fund with a new Horizon Europe. And this, as I understand it, would be, if the plan goes through the European Parliament, it'll be the largest ever European funding programme for research and innovation. And I wonder, is this something, this sort of fund, something you think the UK could be doing? And are there opportunities to work with the EU and with other countries of the world about it collaborate in terms of scientific research, or even co-funding opportunities?
Well, I think we should look very seriously at that, and I understand, that is, being considered. And I think the important thing is whether we choose to go in or not. It doesn't preclude us doing our own independent initiatives. It doesn't preclude us doing work in other parts of the globe. But my contention is that we are going to have to do more detailed work on many of these areas, particularly science and innovation, green, etc., with the EU than perhaps some people currently expect. And it is not saying that we are, doing some new to say that we will be like other third countries, associate members of Horizon program or whatever program that makes sense from an economic point of view.
Right. I've just been told, audience, that the interactive chat is now working. So please have a go at that. But if you don't have any joy, continue, please, to sending questions to the email address that's on the screen, which I gave out. Julian, because the other element of this is universities and higher education cooperation across national frontiers. I was very struck. With my last government job, I went to Sheffield to the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield, and you had there technologists from industry working on the applied side and some of the top scientists from Sheffield University to explore how real sort of cutting edge technological advances that the scientists were just discovering and were still developing and working on might be applied to practical applications in industry. And I came away thinking very strongly we need to do more of that, and we don't do enough of that in Britain. But this surely applies when you look at something like climate, or whether you're dealing with something like how you deal with zoonotic diseases and the risk of pandemics. It needs some comparable system for universities, technologists, scientists to work across national frontiers. And I suppose with a CGE hat on, I'd be saying, well, ought we to be looking for some way for British universities still to be associated with a reformed Erasmus scheme, even though we're not members of the EU any longer? And you say that wouldn't rule out collaboration anywhere else. So what's your thinking about universities and research?
Well, I think Erasmus is a scheme. I mean, there are arguments, there were debates in Parliament, all through the Brexit years about participation or non-participation. I think if we can get a decent deal, let's keep going for the foreseeable future and see how it works, as long as it makes sense from a financial point of view. But yes, this university interaction with business is vital. We've seen this at many UK universities. I saw it in Northern Ireland at Queen's, and they've got many strong initiatives around technology spin-offs and the like. But I think we also have to look at what is happening in places like Germany in manufacturing. We've obviously seen this over the German the German infrastructure of higher education, how it fits with companies, how it fits with chambers of commerce, how it fits with skills development. I think we have made big strides, but I think we have to continue to push forward. And we've always got to have at the top of our minds, inward investors into Europe have got the choice of many countries now. To, I think, be working closely with those countries to make sure that we maximise the opportunity both of being independent and of being close to the EU.
Yeah, thanks. I've got two questions coming in on trade, Julie, which they're both from non-CGE members. Gary Ogavanis says, can the UK achieve a free trade agreement with both the European Union and the US? I suppose actually behind that question is the idea of turning, or what was NAFTA, into a transatlantic free trade agreement. And then Vaskor Bazak says he was a Leave voter in 2016, but he regards himself as pro-Europe. He agrees with the approach of remaining good neighbours with Europe and the EU and continuing close cooperation in areas where that's relevant. And he says, look, could we foresee even the UK leading a version of sort of EU 2.0 in free trade agreements after Brexit, which sort of avoids the issues of loss of control over movement of people and excessive bureaucracy, and actually, we could work on a new to different, an improved form of trade agreement.
Well, look, I think on the first one, I think we will get a deal. I mean, in my view, we have to get a deal, and I think the Prime Minister will get a deal with the EU. But I'm confident he'll also get a deal with the US. I've spent time with senior US officials last week, and I think we will achieve both. And the questioner is right that there's then opportunity, I think, to leverage that. But we've got to move quickly, and I think this is why even 3 months, the idea that we can sort of just keep going for 3 months to negotiate an EU deal, the opportunity cost of us taking so long on each of these areas is huge. So let's get that done. Let's get the US trade deal done. As to what happens once we're out of the EU, I think that the sky is the limit, and I think it will include close working on programs that we've discussed during this session, but also on trading relationship and trading structures. The campaign to leave the EU is now over. We're out, and after the end of December, hopefully there'll be an FTA. That campaign is over. We have to now move into how do we make it work, effectively. And I'm sure this generation of politicians and future generations will be as innovative as possible, and I would encourage them to be as open-minded as possible.
Before I come to what may be the final question on foreign policy, Julian, one come in about the union here. I'm just trying to see. It was Kenny Campbell was saying, look, we've talked very much about international things, but isn't it time our party started to talk more about the union? And I was thinking, reading his question, that Douglas Ross made a very striking contribution to the virtual conference yesterday, and talking about the risks of complacency about the union, and basically it seemed to me Douglas was giving a call to arms to Conservatives and Unionists in all parts of the UK. We need to realise the situation is very serious and get our act together. I mean, again, look at your experience in Northern Ireland and applying that to Scotland as well. Would you agree that sort of English indifference and complacency is a part of the problem? And what would you do about that? And what sort of approach do you think, looking at Scotland perhaps in particular, is going to help win the cause for the union there? Is it to spell out the financial risks of going it alone, or is it that we need a more positive agenda, or does that only appeal to people who are unionist anyway? What's your thinking on that?
Well, look, I mean, I think that there is a major issue. I've felt it in Northern Ireland, and I grew up in Scotland, and I'm in Scotland frequently. And we've got a major issue there as well. And I think it's not caused by this government. It's caused, in large part by time, but also by Brexit itself. The process of Brexit, I think, has not been a good guardian of the union for a variety of reasons. And I think now, as I said earlier, we've got to focus on those unaligned voters in NI, those voters that don't, and swing voters in Scotland. But we've also got, in my view, to have a different approach with nationalists. I think we do have to seek to more, in more detail, understand their position and seek to persuade them of both the economic consequences, defence, foreign policy consequences of leaving, but also start to put to them questions on how issues should be resolved. I think when you see Nicola Sturgeon, sometimes my sense is we give her a free run. I think it's great that Douglas is there. He's clearly now not giving her a free run. And I hope that continues, and that he continues to put her on the spot on each of these decisions. We're far better together, but I think we are not going to persuade people just by waving the flag. We're going to have to put them under, question them, and interrogate how they propose to get through this complex world on their own.
Yeah, and I can't avoid the temptation just to sling in a slightly left field question. You're a Yorkshire Member of Parliament. Devolution for Yorkshire?
I think we've got enough. I think we should have devolution with a mayor, but I don't think we should have Yorkshire independence. I think we should. I think Yorkshire is far too sensible to go down that route, and I think we should be focusing on encouraging all parts of the country. I mean, obviously it's worked well in Birmingham, where I was at university, and other parts of the country, and I think it'd be great for it to happen and for us to have a mayor in Yorkshire. You go there often, David, so maybe you could start a campaign.
Yeah, I'm all in favour of that. I mean, I've actually, one of the things, my experience of government has changed in me. It's made me a complete convert to the idea of devolving more authority within England. I agree. I think metro mayors have got a convening power with local and regional business. Universities can think strategically about regional and sub-regional transport networks and further education and apprenticeships and so on in a way you can't micromanage it from Whitehall.
Yeah.
So I've become a convert to metro mayors and for unitary county or combined authorities outside the metropolitan areas.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And just if this is the last question, David, I would just congratulate you on taking over the lead role in the organisation, and just to any members that are on this call, this is such an important group now, I think, within the Conservative Party in rebuilding our relations with European partners. So I think it's a really crucial part of the suite of organisations under the Conservative umbrella.
And how do you see that as fitting with the idea of global Britain that you
absolutely, because I think global Britain has to start with an engagement with Europe. I can't remember at what point as Chief Whip we needed to do a charm offensive on Germany, and virtually no cabinet minister, yourself excluded and one or two others, had the telephone number of their opposite number in their phones, and that for me revealed how bad things had got. We need every number and every ability to get in touch with our counterparts.
Julian, thank you very much indeed for giving up a chunk of a Sunday evening to speak to us. And I thank all members of the audience, both for tuning in and for submitting questions. Sorry that the CCHQ interactive chat didn't work, but I think our alternative fallback system worked adequately. If anyone wants to learn more about the CGE or join the group, please visit our website, which is www.conservativegroupforeurope.org.uk, or follow us on Twitter @ConsEurope, the address on the screen. But thank you again for taking part, and in particular, warmest of thank yous to Julian Smith for giving up his time to speak to us and for answering our questions.
Stephen.
Good day.